It started with her newfound obsession with fitness. Amanda had always been active, but this was different. She was no longer satisfied with the occasional yoga class or jogging around the neighborhood. Out of nowhere, she wanted to transform her lifestyle, as she put it. She signed up at a fancy gym downtown, the kind with a smoothie bar, sauna, and trainers who looked like they stepped off a magazine cover. At first, I supported her. Why wouldn't I? A healthy lifestyle is great, right? But then, things started to feel off. Amanda became consumed by her workouts. What began as an hour here and there turned into long evenings away from home. Leg day ran over, she'd text, or, sorry, the trainer wanted to go over my progress. Progress? What progress? She hadn't been doing this long enough to see real results yet. Then there was her trainer, Brad. I heard about him constantly. Brad says I should try this, or Brad thinks my form is improving. Every day it was Brad this, Brad that. She talked about him like he was some kind of guru, and the admiration in her voice didn't sit right with me. But I told myself I was overthinking it. Brad was just her trainer. That was his job, right? One night, she came home later than usual, her hair damp like she'd just showered. The gym was crazy tonight, she said, kissing me on the cheek. Her lips felt cold, and the faint smell of cologne lingered. Not hers. Not mine. I didn't ask about it, though. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband. But the feeling in my gut was impossible to ignore. Something wasn't right. It wasn't long before I started noticing more changes. She became distant, her laughter with me less genuine, her touches fleeting. She was glued to her phone, texting constantly, though she never said who it was. Whenever I asked, she'd brush it off. Just a group chat, she'd say with a dismissive smile. Still, I didn't press her. I wanted to trust her. But trust is funny. It's only solid until it's tested. And one Friday evening, when Amanda claimed to be at another late session, I found myself sitting in the dark, staring at the clock, wondering if my trust had already been broken. The next morning, Amanda was up before me, already dressed in her workout clothes. She looked energized, practically glowing as she packed her gym bag. Brad says I'm making amazing progress, she chirped, her voice laced with excitement. I mumbled something supportive, but my mind was somewhere else. Amazing progress? She'd only started this routine a month ago. It felt like everything in her life revolved around Brad and the gym now. And I was fading into the background. It was subtle at first, the little changes. She stopped asking about my day. She started skipping out on our weekend movie nights, claiming she needed an early morning for cardio. She smiled less, laughed less, and when she was home, she was always distracted. Her phone never left her side. That's when I started paying closer attention. Her gym sessions seemed excessive. Amanda had always been punctual, but now she was gone for hours at a time, much longer than any reasonable workout should take. One evening, I casually asked, "What's taking so long at the gym these days?" She froze for half a second, her eyes flickering to me before she recovered. "Oh, you know. Brad's just really thorough with his programs. He makes me stay extra to stretch properly. You wouldn't believe how tight my muscles have been." I forced a laugh, but something in her explanation didn't sit right. "Maybe I should come by sometime," I offered. "You've been raving about the place so much. I'd love to see it." Her smile faltered. "You wouldn't like it," she said quickly. "It's not really your scene. And honestly, I need my alone time there. It's my thing, you know?" Her thing. Not ours. Hers. I nodded and let it go for now. But inside, I was seething. If she didn't want me at the gym, there had to be a reason, and I needed to find out what it was. The tipping point came a few days later when she came home wearing a new sports jacket I'd never seen before. It was expensive looking, sleek, black, and with a logo that wasn't from the gym she joined. "Where'd you get that?" I asked casually, trying to sound more curious than accusatory. "Oh, this?" She glanced down and zipped it halfway up. "Brad gave it to me. He said it'd help me with my outdoor runs." Brad, again. I clenched my jaw, nodding slowly. "That was nice of him," I said, my tone tight. She didn't notice. She was already on her phone, typing furiously, a small smile playing at her lips. That night, when Amanda fell asleep, I made my decision. I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. If she wouldn't give me the truth, I'd find it myself. I waited until she was snoring softly, then slipped out of bed and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. It was locked. Of course it was. She hadn't locked it until a few weeks ago. My stomach churned as I stared at the black screen, but I had another idea. I opened my laptop and logged into our shared cell phone account. Sure enough, I found what I was looking for: dozens of calls and texts to a number I didn't recognize. The pattern was undeniable: long calls during her gym sessions, late-night texts after she'd come home. And guess whose name the number was registered to? Brad. My hands were shaking as I stared at the screen, the truth hitting me like a freight train. It wasn't just workouts. It wasn't just the gym. Something else was happening, and I was going to see it for myself. The plan started forming in my head before I even realized it. If Amanda wouldn't tell me the truth, then I'd get it myself. The following evening, when Amanda kissed me goodbye and left for another one of her extended sessions, I waited exactly 5 minutes before grabbing my keys. My heart was pounding as I drove toward the gym, a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest with every mile. The gym was packed when I arrived. Music blaring from the speakers, the rhythmic clang of weights filling the air. I scanned the crowd, looking for her familiar blonde ponytail or the sleek black sports jacket Brad had gifted her. I didn't see her on the floor. No treadmill, no weight machines. It was as if she wasn't there at all. My chest tightened. Was I overthinking everything? Had she gone somewhere else? Then, I saw them. Near the far corner of the gym, there was a glass-walled private studio labeled Trainer Sessions Only. And inside, Amanda was there. With him? Brad. I froze, watching as they stood inches apart. He was adjusting her form, his hands brushing against her back as she bent over to pick up a barbell. She laughed, an easy, carefree laugh that I hadn't heard in months. I could feel the heat rising in my face. Maybe it was innocent, I told myself. Maybe this was just a professional doing his job. But then Brad leaned in, saying something I couldn't hear, and Amanda's cheeks flushed. She playfully swatted his arm, and they both laughed. That laugh, that blush, those weren't the reactions of someone in a professional setting. I couldn't watch anymore. My stomach churned with anger and disbelief. Before I knew what I was doing, I was walking toward the studio, each step heavier than the last. When I reached the door, I knocked loudly. Amanda and Brad both turned, their faces registering shock as they saw me standing there. Amanda's eyes widened, her smile vanishing. Brad, on the other hand, smirked like he'd just been caught doing something clever. "Ethan?" Amanda stammered, stepping back. "What are you doing here?" I crossed my arms, keeping my voice steady. "I wanted to see the famous gym you've been raving about. Thought I'd surprise you." Brad didn't miss a beat. "Hey man," he said smoothly, extending a hand. "I'm Brad. You must be Amanda's husband." I ignored the hand, my eyes locked on Amanda. "So, this is what's been keeping you busy all these nights?" Her face turned red, not with embarrassment, but with anger. "Ethan, you're overreacting. We're just training." "Training?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Is that what you call sneaking around and laughing like a couple of teenagers?" Brad stepped forward, his hands raised in mock surrender. "Hey man, it's not what you think. Amanda is just one of my clients. I'm helping her meet her fitness goals." I glared at him, my fists clenching. "I'm not here to talk to you." Turning to Amanda, I said, "Are you going to tell me what's really going on, or are you going to keep lying to my face?" Her lips parted as if to respond, but no words came out. She looked at Brad, then back at me, like she was weighing her options. That hesitation was all the confirmation I needed. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the gym, ignoring her calls for me to stop. I couldn't bear to hear another excuse, another lie. As I drove home, my knuckles white against the steering wheel, I made a vow to myself. I wouldn't let this break me. Whatever was going on, I would find out the whole truth. And when I did, they would both regret underestimating me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. Her flushed cheeks, his smug smirk. It was like a broken record, playing over and over in my mind. The next morning, Amanda acted like nothing had happened. She greeted me with a cheery "good morning," poured herself some coffee, and started scrolling through her phone as if I hadn't just caught her in what felt like the beginning of betrayal. I couldn't take it. "We need to talk," I said, my voice tight. She looked up, her face carefully neutral. "About what?" "Last night," I said, my jaw clenching. "About you and Brad." Her eyes flickered, but she recovered quickly, taking a long sip of her coffee. "Ethan, I don't know what you're trying to say, but there's nothing going on. He's my trainer. That's it." I stared at her, searching for any sign of guilt, some crack in the mask she was wearing. But she just stared back, calm and composed, as if she were the one in control. "You expect me to believe that?" I said finally. "You've been spending hours with him every day, coming home late, acting distant, and I'm just supposed to think this is all about fitness?" She sighed, setting her mug down. "Ethan, you're being paranoid. I told you, Brad's helping me get in shape. That's all this is. You can either believe me or not, but I'm not going to defend myself over nothing." Her calm dismissal made my blood boil. How could she act so nonchalant when everything about her behavior screamed that something was wrong? I decided then and there that I couldn't rely on her to tell me the truth. If I wanted answers, I'd have to find them myself. Later that day, when Amanda left for the gym again, I stayed behind and started digging. I combed through her social media, looking for anything out of place. I scrolled through old posts, scrutinized comments, and even checked her tagged photos. And then I found it. It was a group photo, posted on the gym's page from 2 weeks ago. Amanda was in the center, flanked by Brad and a few other trainers. She was smiling, her hand resting casually on Brad's arm. But what caught my eye wasn't the photo itself, it was the caption. "Shout out to Brad for helping Amanda crush her fitness goals. Hashtag Team Brad, hashtag transformation journey." My stomach churned as I clicked on the hashtag. It led to a string of posts from other clients, all singing Brad's praises. But buried among the glowing testimonials was something more personal. Selfies of Brad with various women, his arms slung around their shoulders, his grin smug and overconfident. One post, in particular, made my skin crawl. It was a photo of Brad standing in front of a mirror, shirtless, with the caption, "Dedication pays off, in and out of the gym. Hashtag grind hard." I scrolled through the comments, and sure enough, Amanda's name was there. "Looking good, Brad." Clapping hands fire. My hands tightened into fists as I stared at the screen. She had been commenting on his photos, flirting in plain sight, while I sat at home oblivious. But it didn't stop there. I went back to our shared cell phone account and checked the call logs again. The pattern was unmistakable. Calls and texts to Brad every day, sometimes late into the night. I felt like a fool. How long had this been going on? How much of her time and her heart had she given to him? But the worst part? I wasn't even angry at her anymore. I was angry at myself for ignoring the signs, for letting her lies fester, for trusting someone who didn't deserve it. It was time to stop playing the clueless husband. The next step was clear. I had to catch her in the act, not just for my own sanity, but so there would be no room for denial. I decided to play it smart. If Amanda thought she could keep me in the dark, I would let her think that, for now. But I needed proof, something undeniable, something she couldn't explain away with a dismissive excuse. The following week, I set the plan in motion. I told Amanda I had a late meeting at work, then left the house early, parking my car a few blocks away. I took an Uber back to our neighborhood and waited near the gym's parking lot, hidden in plain sight behind a row of bushes. Her car pulled in right on schedule. I watched as she stepped out, her gym bag slung over her shoulder, wearing the same black sports jacket Brad had given her. She walked inside without hesitation, her head held high, like someone who had nothing to hide. I waited 10 minutes before heading inside myself. The gym was bustling, just like last time, with people scattered across treadmills, weight benches, and yoga mats. I scanned the room quickly, looking for her, but she wasn't on the main floor. Then I saw Brad. He was near the back, standing by the same private studio as before. He was alone, leaning casually against the doorframe, scrolling through his phone. I kept my distance, pretending to stretch as I watched him. A few minutes later, Amanda appeared, her face lighting up as she approached him. They exchanged a few words, and then Brad stepped aside, holding the door open for her. My chest tightened as I watched them disappear into the studio, the door closing behind them. I wanted to burst in, to demand answers right then and there, but I knew I needed more. That's when I noticed the cleaning staff. One of them was wheeling a cart toward the studio, carrying towels and cleaning supplies. He unlocked the door to an adjacent supply closet, leaving it ajar as he stepped inside. An idea struck me, reckless but necessary. I waited until the coast was clear, then slipped into the closet. It was cramped and dimly lit, with shelves lined with disinfectant bottles and folded towels. But what caught my attention was the small air vent on the far wall. I crouched down, peering through the vent. It gave me a partial view of the private studio, just enough to see Amanda and Brad standing close together. Too close. They were laughing about something, Brad gesturing animatedly while Amanda leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. She looked happy, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen her in months. My heart sank as I watched him reach out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Amanda didn't pull away. In fact, she smiled. My pulse pounded in my ears as I pulled out my phone, snapping a few photos through the vent. The angle wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough to capture their body language. How comfortable they were with each other, how intimate the moment seemed. I felt sick. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was real. I slipped out of the closet as quietly as I had entered, my head spinning as I walked back to my car. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a mockery of everything we had built together. As I sat in the driver's seat, staring blankly at the dashboard, I realized something else. I wasn't just angry at Amanda or Brad. I was angry at myself for letting it get this far, for ignoring the signs, for believing her excuses when deep down, I knew better. But I wasn't going to let this destroy me. Not anymore. I had the proof now, the leverage I needed, and it was time to decide how to use it. When I got home that night, Amanda was already there, lounging on the couch with her feet tucked under her. She looked up as I walked in, offering me a warm smile. "Hey, you're back early. I thought you had a late meeting?" I forced a smile, setting my keys on the counter. "Yeah, it got canceled last minute." "Oh, that's nice," she said, returning her attention to the TV. "We can watch something together if you want." The casualness of her tone was like a slap in the face. She was sitting there, acting like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just spent the evening with another man. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to throw the photos in her face and demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I sat down beside her, playing along. We watched a show, her laughter echoing through the room while I stared blankly at the screen, my mind racing. I had to be smart about this. If I let my anger take over, she'd twist it around, make herself the victim, and I couldn't let that happen. Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep, I reviewed the photos on my phone. They weren't as damning as I wanted them to be. There was no physical contact, nothing explicitly inappropriate. But the way they looked at each other, the closeness between them, it was enough to prove that this wasn't just training. I needed more. The next day, I called in sick to work and spent hours researching private investigators. I found one with stellar reviews, a retired cop named Frank, who specialized in infidelity cases. His voice was gruff but professional when I called him. "Tell me what's going on," he said. I hesitated for a moment, then spilled everything. Amanda's sudden obsession with the gym, her late nights, the texts and calls to Brad, and the photos I had taken. Frank listened without interrupting, then said, "Sounds like you've got enough to be suspicious, but not enough to confront her outright. Let me do some digging. We'll get to the bottom of this." We agreed to meet the following morning so I could hand over the photos and any other information he might need. That night, I acted like everything was normal. Amanda was chatty, telling me about her day and the amazing new program Brad had started her on. I nodded and smiled, keeping my voice light, but every word out of her mouth felt like a dagger. She had no idea what was coming. Frank worked fast. Within a few days, he had already compiled a preliminary report. When I met him at his office, he handed me a folder filled with photos and notes. "I followed her after she left the gym," he explained. "They went to a cafe together. Looked like a pretty cozy conversation to me." I flipped through the photos, Amanda and Brad sitting at a small table, leaning in close, their faces lit by soft cafe lights. She was laughing, her hand brushing his arm. She's been seeing him outside of the gym. Then, I muttered, my jaw tightening. Frank nodded. That's just the start. I also checked his background. Your boy Brad has a bit of a reputation. He's had, let's call them relationships, with a few of his other clients. None of them lasted long, but there's a pattern. I felt my stomach churn. So this isn't the first time? Nope, Frank said, leaning back in his chair. But here's the kicker. I pulled some financial records. Looks like she's been sending him money. What? I snapped, the words barely registering. Frank slid another sheet across the desk. Venmo transfers. Small amounts at first, $50 here, $100 there. But last week, she sent him $500. I stared at the paper, my blood boiling. What the hell is she paying him for? Could be anything, Frank said with a shrug. But it's not gym-related, I can tell you that much. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. It wasn't just emotional anymore. It was financial. She was funneling our money, my money, to him. Frank leaned forward, his expression serious. Look, I know this is tough, but you've got enough now to confront her if that's what you want to do. Or, if you're planning something longer term, I can keep digging. I clenched my fists, my mind racing. Confronting her now would feel good in the moment, but it wouldn't undo what she'd done, and it wouldn't give me the upper hand. No, I said finally. Not yet. Keep digging. Frank nodded, his eyes steady. You got it. By the time I got home that evening, the weight of everything Frank had shown me felt suffocating. The photos, the money transfers, Brad's pattern. It was all spinning in my head like a storm I couldn't escape. Amanda was in the kitchen, humming softly as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She looked so normal, so serene, as if she hadn't been unraveling our marriage thread by thread behind my back. Hey, she said brightly when she saw me. How was your day? Busy, I replied, forcing a smile. I sat at the table, watching her move around the kitchen like nothing was wrong. How could she act so natural when everything between us had become a lie? It was almost impressive, her ability to compartmentalize. But now that I knew the truth, I could see the cracks beneath the surface. The little things stood out more than ever. The way she avoided eye contact when she mentioned the gym, how she kept her phone face down on the counter, the slight pause before she answered simple questions. Late session at the gym tomorrow? I asked casually, taking a sip of water. She glanced at me briefly, then back at the cutting board. Yeah, Brad wants to go over my progress again. He's been pushing me pretty hard lately. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Sounds intense. Do you ever feel like you're spending too much time there? She froze for half a second, her knife hovering above a carrot. What do you mean? I mean, it's a lot of hours, I said, keeping my tone light. I just miss spending time with you, that's all. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, and she smiled over her shoulder. That's sweet, Ethan. But this is important to me. I need this. I nodded, pretending to accept her answer, but inside, I was seething. You need this? What about me? What about us? I decided to push a little further. Have you and Brad ever hung out outside of the gym? You seem pretty close. Her hand slipped, the knife clattering against the cutting board. She recovered quickly, laughing nervously. What? No, of course not. Why would you even ask that? Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She was lying again. The following evening, Amanda left for another session, and I decided to follow her. This time, I kept a safe distance, tailing her car as she drove downtown. But instead of heading straight to the gym, she turned onto a side street and pulled into the parking lot of a small bistro. I parked a block away and watched as she got out of her car. Brad was already waiting for her. They hugged, right there in the open, like they had nothing to hide. My chest tightened as I watched them walk into the bistro together, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I sat there for what felt like hours, my anger simmering just below the surface. When they finally came back out, it was dark, and the parking lot was mostly empty. They lingered by Amanda's car, talking quietly. Then Brad leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. It wasn't much. It wasn't passionate or romantic. But it was intimate. Too intimate. I clenched the steering wheel, my knuckles white as I fought the urge to storm out and confront them both right there. But I knew better. Instead, I grabbed my phone and snapped a few photos. By the time I got home, I had made up my mind. It wasn't enough to confront her anymore. This had gone too far, and I needed to make her feel the weight of what she'd done. The photos, the evidence from Frank, the money transfers, it was all part of my plan now. Amanda thought she was in control, that she could keep her secret life hidden while I stayed blissfully unaware. But she was wrong. That night, as she climbed into bed beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I could feel the distance between us like a chasm I'd never be able to cross. She didn't know it yet, but her perfect little web of lies was about to collapse. And when it did, I'd be the one holding the strings. Over the next few days, I fine-tuned my plan. Every moment Amanda spent at the gym, I used to gather more evidence and prepare my next steps. Frank had continued his work, uncovering more financial transactions and a string of texts between Amanda and Brad. Though nothing explicitly romantic was written, the tone was undeniable. Inside jokes, late-night messages, and plans to meet outside the gym. The final straw came when Frank called me with a new discovery. Amanda had booked a hotel room. "It's set for this Friday night," he told me. She used her personal credit card, but the reservation includes Brad's name too. My blood boiled. This wasn't just an affair. It was a slap in the face, and I was done being a spectator. Friday arrived, and I pretended everything was normal. Amanda kissed me goodbye, claiming she had another training session planned. I wished her luck, my voice calm and steady, masking the storm inside me. As soon as she left, I grabbed the file of evidence Frank had compiled and headed to the hotel. When I arrived at the hotel, I checked in with Frank, who had been monitoring the situation from his car outside. "They're here," he confirmed. "Checked in about 20 minutes ago." My heart pounded as I walked into the lobby. The place was upscale, with polished marble floors and a concierge desk that oozed luxury. I approached the front desk, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Can I help you, sir?" the receptionist asked, her polite smile almost infuriating. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "I need to know which room Amanda Taylor and Brad Gibson are in." The receptionist hesitated. "I'm sorry, but I can't give out that information." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Listen, I know they're here, and I have every right to see them. You can either tell me now, or I can involve hotel security and the police. Your choice." Her smile faltered, and after a moment, she checked her computer. "Room 512, she said quietly. I nodded, heading straight for the elevators. When I reached the door to their room, I hesitated for a split second. Then I knocked hard. There was a pause, and then the door opened. Brad stood there, his face registering shock before quickly morphing into that smug grin I'd come to despise. "Well, this is unexpected," he said, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Is it?" I shot back, stepping forward. "Where's Amanda?" Brad didn't move, blocking the doorway. "She's busy right now. Maybe you should come back later." I clenched my fists, ready to force my way inside, when Amanda's voice came from behind him. "Who is it, Brad?" She appeared in the doorway, her face draining of color when she saw me. "Ethan," she stammered. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I repeated, my voice cold. "Why don't you tell me? Or better yet, let me show you." I pulled out my phone and began scrolling through the photos and evidence I'd collected. I showed her the pictures of her with Brad, the financial transactions, and finally, the hotel reservation confirmation. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked at Brad, then back at me, panic flickering in her eyes. "This isn't what it looks like," she started, but I cut her off. "Don't," I snapped, my voice rising. "Don't insult me by lying again. You've been caught, Amanda. There's no talking your way out of this." Amanda's mask of composure finally cracked. Her voice trembled as she tried to explain. "It's not serious," she said. "It was just, I don't know, a distraction. Things between us have been so distant lately." "Don't you dare blame this on me," I interrupted, my voice shaking with fury. "I've been here, Amanda. I've been trying. You're the one who checked out." Brad, ever the smug opportunist, leaned back against the doorframe, arms crossed. Maybe you should have paid more attention to her, man, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. That was the breaking point. I lunged forward, grabbing him by the collar. You think this is a joke? I growled. You've been sneaking around with my wife, and you have the nerve to stand here like it's no big deal? Amanda pulled me back, her voice frantic. Ethan, stop. This isn't helping. I released Brad, shoving him back into the room. My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to stay calm. This is over, I said, glaring at both of them. You can have each other. But I promise you, Amanda, you're going to regret every second of this. I spent the next few weeks putting my plan into action. I filed for divorce immediately, citing infidelity and attaching all the evidence I'd gathered. My lawyer assured me that the financial misconduct, Amanda using our joint funds to support Brad, would work heavily in my favor. Meanwhile, I made it clear to Amanda that her time in our house was over. She tried to argue, begged for more time, but I didn't budge. You made your choice, I told her. Now you live with the consequences. As for Brad, his reputation took a hit as well. Word spread quickly about his relationships with clients, and he was let go from the gym. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy. There were days when the betrayal still stung, when the memories crept in like shadows. But with every passing week, I felt stronger. Amanda reached out once, months after the divorce was finalized. She wanted to apologize, to explain herself, but I didn't give her the chance. You said everything you needed to when you walked into that hotel room, I told her before hanging up. Now, I focus on myself, on the future I'm building without her. I've started going to the gym, not to chase ghosts, but to take care of myself. Because in the end, that's what I learned. You can't control what others do, but you can control how you respond. And I chose to rise from the ashes of betrayal, stronger than ever.